Welcome to the Right News Network.
Hello and welcome. I'm Emma with the headlines that matter most right now. The United States is hitting pause on a military operation meant to protect ships passing through one of the world's most critical waterways. President Trump says progress in talks with Iran is the reason for standing down Project Freedom. Our Middle East correspondent Layla Nazari has this. Layla?
Well, Emma, that's right. Trump announced today that the operation, which just started on Monday, is being suspended because they're saying there's real momentum in negotiations with Iran. Look, this operation was supposed to escort commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz, which is absolutely crucial. About a third of the world's oil passes through there. But right now, there are actually several ships stuck in the strait because of the tensions between Washington and Tehran, and captains are dealing with enormous pressure.
So if they're pausing the escort operation, does that mean things are actually getting better between the U.S. and Iran?
Well, that's the thing. It's complicated. Yes, there's a ceasefire in place, and yes, Defense Secretary Hegseth confirmed its holding. But here's what's interesting. The U.S. is still blockading Iranian ports. So you've got this situation where the U.S. says, let's talk, but they're also squeezing Iran's economy at the same time. From Tehran's perspective, that doesn't exactly look like good faith. I mean, they want sanctions relief before they'll actually sign anything.
Layla, thank you. Continuing on world news, diplomatic efforts between the U.S. and Iran could determine whether global oil markets remain stable or face new shocks. And still with Layla, what is the latest from the region?
Well, Emma, Trump's basically hit the pause button on this military operation in the Strait of Hormuz. He's saying he wants to negotiate with Iran instead. But here's the thing. Both sides are still making threats. The U.S. military says the operation's just begun, which is really code for, we can restart this anytime, and Iran's warning against further escalation. So it's not exactly peace breaking out.
But why would Trump pause a military operation if he's still demanding Iran's nuclear program be dismantled?
Look, it's leverage. He's trying to show Iran there's a diplomatic path that's less painful than having U.S. ships blockading their main export route. But honestly, experts I've spoken with think Iran's not going to accept the kind of nuclear restrictions Trump's demanding. This feels more like positioning for negotiations than actual progress toward a deal.
Layla, appreciate the insight. Continuing on world affairs, the death toll from Russian strikes across Ukraine continues to mount, raising serious questions about the sincerity of both sides' ceasefire proposals. Our defense correspondent Marcus Webb has this. Marcus?
Well, Emma, what we're seeing here is a pretty clear pattern. Russia announced this ceasefire for May 9th. That's their victory day. But in the meantime, they're launching these massive drone and missile barrages across Ukraine. At least 26 people were killed today alone, over 80 wounded. And Zelensky is calling it cynicism. And honestly, he's got a point. Ukraine announced its own ceasefire for May 6th. But these two timelines don't even line up.
So, are these ceasefires actually going to hold?
I think the short answer is no, Emma. Look, what's interesting is that neither side seems to be negotiating in good faith here. Russia is basically saying, we'll pause for our holiday. Ukraine's saying, we'll pause for ours. But there's no real mechanism or trust between them. The strikes continue, casualties pile up, and these proposed pauses are looking more like public relations than actual military agreements. I'd expect this fighting to intensify again within days.
Marcus, appreciate that perspective. Continuing on world affairs, Russia and Ukraine are locked in a dangerous game of ceasefire proposals ahead of Moscow's Victory Day celebration, each side offering conditional truces while attacks continue killing civilians. Ukraine says it will halt operations beginning May 6th and then act symmetrically if Russia violates the truce, while Moscow announced its own pause for the May 9th parade. International observers warn these competing truces are more about diplomatic positioning than genuine de-escalation, with fighting expected to resume within days. A temporary ceasefire between the United States and Iran is holding following recent military clashes, with the Trump administration pushing to finalize a broader deal. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the truce certainly holds for now, after a naval confrontation and attacks on the UAE. Global oil markets are already reflecting the reduced tensions, with crude prices declining as traders move away from conflict-driven uncertainty. The U.S. military is ramping up its fight against drug smugglers operating in the Pacific Ocean. Those operations are raising questions about how far the military should go in stopping traffickers at sea. Back to Marcus Webb on what's happening. Marcus, what is the latest?
Well, Emma, Southcom confirmed that they killed 3 suspected narco-terrorists on a drug trafficking vessel in the Eastern Pacific on Tuesday. What's interesting is this is the second strike in 2 days, which tells you we're seeing a real escalation in these maritime counter-narcotics operations. These guys are operating on major trafficking routes where cartels are moving tons of drugs before they ever get close to U.S. shores.
So why is the military getting more aggressive about this right now?
Look, the military says these are necessary operations to protect national security. I mean, these trafficking networks generate billions of dollars annually and fuel violence across the region. But here's the thing. Human rights groups and some Latin American governments are pushing back, saying we need to be capturing these guys and prosecuting them through the courts rather than strikes at sea. There's real debate happening about the legal framework and accountability.
Marcus, appreciate it. Moving to the energy markets, global oil reserves have hit their lowest point in 8 years as conflict in the Middle East strains supplies worldwide. The United States is now exporting crude oil at record levels, 5.2 million barrels a day since April, as the world scrambles to replace lost Middle Eastern production. Watch for whether those American reserves can sustain this pace, or if energy prices spike again this summer. Two people are dead after a car plowed into a crowd in the German city of Leipzig on Monday, with a 33-year-old man detained by authorities. A separate fire in an Iranian shopping center has killed 8 people and injured dozens. We'll continue monitoring both situations as investigators work to determine the circumstances surrounding these incidents. Continuing on world affairs, a deadly mine explosion in Colombia is raising urgent questions about worker safety in one of the hemisphere's most dangerous mining regions. Our world affairs correspondent James Chen has this. James?
Well, Emma, 9 coal miners are dead after a gas explosion at a mine in Sutatausa in central Colombia. What's really striking here is this is the second major disaster at the same location in less than 2 years. Mining accidents are incredibly common in this part of Colombia, where you've got dozens of small operators running coal and emerald mines, and a lot of them operate without much oversight or safety infrastructure.
This is the second time in 2 years. Why does this same area keep experiencing these catastrophes?
Look, here's the thing. Sutatausa is in one of Colombia's poorest regions, and mining is basically the only economic opportunity for a lot of people there. The operators are under constant pressure to maximize production and cut costs, so safety gets pushed to the back. You've got inadequate ventilation systems, minimal safety equipment, and workers who are desperate enough to accept those dangerous conditions because there's literally nothing else available to them.
James, appreciate it. Romania's pro-European government has collapsed after Prime Minister Ilie Bologan lost a no-confidence vote in parliament, with the largest party in his own coalition joining far-right opposition parties to remove him. The shock defection leaves the EU and NATO member state without a functioning government at a time when it faces security pressures from the Ukraine conflict. The country now must scramble to form a new coalition or face fresh elections.
Time to go deeper. Beyond the headlines, our full analysis of the story shaping the world right now.
The United States launched Project Freedom with a burst of muscular rhetoric. American warships escorting commercial vessels through one of the world's most dangerous choke points. Then, within days, the operation was paused. President Trump says it's because progress has been made toward a deal with Iran. But with a ceasefire described as fragile, Iranian ports still under American blockade, and at least one commercial ship captain telling the BBC his crew is under enormous pressure just being there. The question tonight is whether Washington has just projected strength or handed Tehran a win. Joining me now are Marcus Webb, our defense and security analyst, and Sophia Reeves, our economics and markets editor. Marcus, let me start with you. Is pausing Project Freedom a sign of diplomatic sophistication, or has Trump just blinked?
Thanks, Emma. And I'll be direct. This pause worries me, not because I think Trump is weak, but because the optics of launching a major naval escort operation and suspending it within the same week send a signal that Iran's strategic planners will be analyzing very carefully. Here's the thing. Deterrence is not just about what you can do, it's about what your adversary believes you will do. The moment Tehran senses that American resolve is negotiable, they start pushing. We've seen this cycle play out under Obama, under parts of the first Trump term, and under Biden's catastrophic retreat from the region. CENTCOM spokesman Tim Hawkins said the priorities remain securing safe routes and blockading Iran. Good, but a stated priority and an active operation are two very different things. Douglas Murray has written that the West has a chronic problem with finishing what it starts, with projecting force and then blinking at the critical moment. And I'm concerned this is exactly that moment. What Iran needs to see is that America will escort those ships through the Strait regardless of whether negotiations are progressing, because the moment you make deterrence conditional on diplomatic goodwill, you've handed your adversary a veto over your own military posture.
But Marcus, isn't there an argument that pausing the operation to give diplomacy a chance is exactly what a smart negotiator does? If Trump keeps the blockade running and keeps military assets in the Gulf, has he really given anything away? And Sophia, what's your take? What's the economic reality here for the markets and the people actually moving goods through that strait?
Well, look, I think Marcus is making a critical error by treating this purely as a signals game without looking at the underlying economics. Here's what I think he's missing. The commercial shipping industry was already under enormous pressure before this week. We're talking about a waterway that carries 21 million barrels of oil every single day. 20% of global petroleum liquids. When insurance premiums in the Gulf spike, when tanker rates surge, and they have dramatically during previous periods of Iranian harassment, the people who pay are not diplomats, they're ordinary consumers. Petrol prices, heating bills, manufacturing costs. So yes, I want America to project strength, but I also want a deal that actually sticks, because the economic cost of a prolonged standoff in the Hormuz is enormous, and it falls disproportionately on working people. If this pause buys a real agreement with real verification, the free market case for taking it is actually quite strong.
I hear what Sophia is saying, but with respect, that misses the point entirely. You don't get a real agreement with real verification by pausing your leverage. You get a real agreement by maintaining pressure until the other side capitulates. Iran's entire negotiating history tells us one thing. They respond to maximum pressure and they exploit any sign of retreat. The JCPOA is the textbook case. The regime used that sanctions relief to increase the IRGC's defense budget by 90% within 18 months. 90%. While the diplomatic class in Washington and Brussels was congratulating itself. The economic argument for a deal is only valid if the deal is real. And the way you make a deal real is by keeping your boots on the throat until you have it, not before.
Here's what I want to know. We're 6 months out. Either this deal happens, or it collapses, or something worse unfolds. Sophia, where do you see this going? And what's the risk to global markets if this goes wrong?
The way I see this playing out, there are really two paths that markets are pricing right now. If a deal is signed with genuine verification mechanisms, something that actually constrains the nuclear program and the ballistic missile development and the proxy funding, then oil stabilizes, insurance rates normalize, and the enormous premium that global markets have been building in for Gulf risk starts to deflate. That's a real economic win. But if this pause becomes a habit, if it becomes the new normal that America launches operations and then stands them down without locking in concessions, then the trajectory suggests a gradual re-escalation of Iranian maritime aggression, and markets will reprice that risk sharply. The captain of that stranded vessel told the BBC his crew is under pressure. Multiply that across dozens of ships, dozens of crews, trillions of dollars in cargo. The economic stakes are not abstract.
Here's what concerns me most. It's not actually the next 6 months in the Gulf. It's what the next 6 months in the Gulf tells Beijing and Pyongyang and Moscow about American resolve. If Iran successfully waits out a U.S. naval operation through a combination of ceasefire rhetoric and negotiation theater, every adversary on the planet updates their model of American commitment. Taiwan is watching. Ukraine is watching. The South China Sea is watching. The real risk here isn't oil prices. It's that a pattern of American hesitation in one theater emboldens adventurism in others simultaneously. History tells us that weakness in one region is never contained to that region. That's the trajectory that should keep everyone up at night.
Marcus Webb, Sophia Reeves, a genuinely fascinating and genuinely uncomfortable conversation. One thing's for certain, somewhere in Tehran tonight, someone is reading the fine print of that pause very, very carefully. Three people are dead on a cruise ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. A British crew member is fighting for his life. 17 Americans are trapped on board, and the World Health Organization is telling us that a virus, which almost never spreads between humans, may now be doing exactly that. The MV Hondius is anchored off the coast of Cape Verde, heading to the Canary Islands in 3 to 4 days, and we still don't fully understand how this outbreak started or how it's spreading. This is not a drill. Joining me now are Sophia Reeves, our economics and markets editor, and James Chen, our geopolitical analyst. Sophia, let me start with you. Is the international response to this outbreak fast enough? And are governments doing their jobs?
Thanks, Emma. No. The short answer is categorically no, and I think we need to stop tiptoeing around that. 3 people are dead, 7 confirmed or suspected cases on a single enclosed vessel. And what do we get from the WHO? We get the word may. They may have seen human-to-human transmission. This is an institution that spent the first weeks of COVID telling us there was no evidence of human-to-human spread. Sound familiar? Douglas Murray has made the point brilliantly that Western institutions have developed this almost pathological need to manage perception before they manage reality, and we are watching it happen in real time. Where is the British government? British citizens are in critical condition on that ship. Where is the urgency? Where are the officials standing at a podium saying, here is exactly what we are doing to get our people home safely? And don't get me started on the cruise operator. Oceanwide Expeditions has a commercial interest in managing this narrative, and I'd bet my career that the passengers' access to clear information has been filtered through a corporate communications department every step of the way.
But Sophia, to be fair, isn't the WHO in a difficult position here? They're coordinating across multiple jurisdictions, multiple nationalities, a ship in international waters. Surely this kind of international coordination is exactly what multilateral institutions exist to do. And James, what's your take on this? Is Sophia being too hard on the institutions here?
Well, look, Sophia is right that the response has been slow, but I think she's conflating 2 separate problems. The institutional failure is real, but here's what I think she's missing. The more urgent and frankly more alarming issue is the epidemiology itself. We are potentially looking at a hantavirus strain with human-to-human transmission capability. The case fatality rate in this cluster is running at roughly 43%, 3 deaths from 7 suspected cases. The Andes virus, the only hantavirus strain with documented sustained human-to-human spread, kills between 25 and 35% of those infected. If we're dealing with something in that family, the WHO's caution isn't just bureaucratic cowardice. It's because the scientific implications are enormous, and they don't want to trigger mass panic before they understand what they're dealing with. The data matters here. You can't scream pandemic every time you have a cluster before you know the mechanism of transmission.
I hear what James is saying, but with respect, that misses the point entirely. The scientific caution argument is exactly the excuse that gets people killed. You know what happened when institutions exercised scientific caution about early COVID transmission data? Millions of people died. I'm not saying we panic. I'm saying 17 Americans are on that ship. A British crew member needs urgent medical care. The governments of Britain, the Netherlands, and the United States should not be waiting for a WHO technical bulletin to tell them to act. Ben Shapiro says it constantly. Government's first duty is to protect its own citizens. That's it. That's the job. And right now, nobody is doing the job.
Here's what I want to know, and I want both of you on this. The ship is heading to the Canary Islands in 3 to 4 days. What happens when it gets there, and what are the risks of disembarkation? James, where do you see this going?
The way I see this playing out, the most dangerous window is not the voyage. It's the moment passengers step off that ship. Hantavirus has an incubation period of 1 to 8 weeks. That means people currently aboard who feel completely fine could be incubating the virus right now and have no idea. If human-to-human transmission is genuinely occurring, the ship is a vector, yes, but so is every passenger who boards a flight home from the Canary Islands. Spanish health authorities need to be running comprehensive screening, implementing a meaningful quarantine protocol, and coordinating with the CDC, the ECDC, and the UK Health Security Agency before anyone disembarks. The trajectory suggests that if Spain treats this like a standard maritime health event, they will regret it.
Here's what concerns me most: the complacency that follows the crisis-managed announcement. The moment that ship docks and officials hold a press conference saying everything is under control, the public attention moves on. But those passengers go home. Some of them are asymptomatic. And if one of them is carrying a hantavirus strain capable of human-to-human transmission into a European city, into London, into Amsterdam, into New York, the window to contain that closes very fast. History tells us that the most catastrophic outbreak failures happen in the gap between we've contained it and we haven't. That gap is where the MV Hondius sits right now.
Sophia Reeves, James Chen, a sobering and frankly frightening analysis. One thing is absolutely clear tonight. If there is anyone in a government health ministry who is treating this as a box-ticking exercise, the people on that ship deserve a great deal better, and so does the rest of the world.
That wraps up today's top stories. I'm Emma. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.